accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is episode number 125. I am your co-host Myron Rumsey, and I am joined by my good friend Phil Bova. Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Myron. Good to talk to you again, bud.
So we've got a special treat lined up. Originally we were supposed to talk about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 49 and 50. We were going to record on release day, and then we had a retro review to do and so on. And yesterday I got an email from a PR firm doing publicity for Robert Venditti and Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 50. And they contacted me and said, hey, you want to do an interview? And we'll send you the copy of the issue a day ahead of time. So you and I have had the luxury of reading it on Tuesday. This is when you and I are recording it, so we can release it tomorrow to coincide with the release of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 50 and Robert Venditti's final issue. And we get to talk to Robert Venditti on top of it.
And what better way to pay homage to him? I mean, this man has taken this character to new levels. I mean, how many issues has he written? 85, I think?
Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah,
it goes back to
85 plus. Yeah.
And it's going to be my first time talking to him and get to meet him. And I've seen him on Twitter, and we go back and forth every once in a while, but it's going to be nice to get to hear him and talk about the industry and stuff.
Yep, and it just is a special thank you to the guys at DC Comics and for letting us be a part of it, because we're a small thing. We're a small thing in the big cog of the comic book media, and we're not Newsarama, we're not Comic Book Resources or the Sci-Fi Portal place that does stuff or any of those things. We're just a couple of middle-aged guys who love comics and love Green Lantern, and for them to give us a piece of the pie is fantastic from my perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree, but it's the small people that make a difference. I mean, that's a lot of where a lot of these comic book writers and artists come from, is these independent contractors. The small business firms that come up. I mean, a lot of your small ink publishers, not DC and Marvel, but a lot of your minor ones came out of the underground movements and stuff. So it's the small people that do count. I wish people would understand that.
So Rob holds a record. This will be Rob's sixth time on the podcast of OA. I think we owe him like a VIP lounge visit key or something, because man, he's just been very, very approachable and always very gracious with his time. So I'm looking forward to talking to him again.
Good. I'm looking forward to hearing from him. It's going to be nice. I want to get his views on how he feels about the character and what he's done over the past decade.
Yeah. So I think this will be our review of issue 50, as well as talking about Rob's career on the book. And we're going to skip 49 altogether, because after talking about 50, well, I can't go backwards and talk about 49 at this point. So
especially with that last page.
Oh, I know, it's killer. So if you folks haven't read the issue, you don't want to listen to this show. Don't let it spoil your reading experience, because it's worth experiencing it on your own before you listen to us talk to Rob. So because we will be talking spoilers, definitely talking spoilers.
Exactly. We respect the fans.
That's right. So let's take a quick break. I've got a bumper from Dan Bacocchio and his podcast. He sent it to me the other day. We talked. He played his voicemail last episode. So he sent me a bumper, and I want to put this in here to promote his show. So we'll put that in, and then we'll jump right into Rob. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Sounds great.
The Island, a comic, sci-fi, fantasy, pop culture podcast. I'm Dan.
I'm Matt.
And if you like spoiler-free
and spoiler-full
discussions, then you definitely want to check out this podcast. We cover The Flash,
Black Lightning,
Supergirl,
Legends of Tomorrow,
Stranger Things,
Legion,
The Gifted,
Gotham,
Walking Dead,
Fear the Walking Dead,
Westworld,
Game of Thrones.
So don't forget to check us out on all of your popular podcast apps.
Well, welcome back to the podcast of OA, and we have a real special episode. Today, the 50th issue of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps comes out, ending Robert Venditti's run. And what better way to talk about Green Lantern and the end of Robert Venditti's run than to talk to Robert Venditti himself. So, Robert, welcome back to the podcast of OA.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you having me back. I want to say you guys talked to me pretty early on, 5 years ago. So it's nice to come back and visit with you guys again when we're here at the end of things.
We're really glad to have you. You're kind of the man of the hour right now. I mean, there's been articles about the ending of this run all over the place on the internet. Are you kind of interviewed out at this point?
I think it will last exactly 1 hour, and then nobody will know who I am again. No, yeah, I mean, it's nice. I'm glad that people want to talk about it. You know what I mean? You never know when you do. When you work on a series, you never know how people are going to respond to it, or if there's going to be anything that connects with people, or if they're going to be interested. So the idea that people wanted to talk to me and talk about the final issue and the end of the run, I take it as a great compliment, and can't thank you and everybody else enough for wanting to read it and to be interested in it enough to want to talk to me. So it's always fun to do those things.
The issue that came out today was oversized, and I was really kind of glad that there were extra pages there. Now, was that something that you asked for, or did DC give you the extra pages to work on this issue?
It was known that it was going to be extra. I want to say, don't hold me to this, I don't read all the solicitations and know them by heart, but just like with the 25s, they were also 28 pages. 50 is another milestone. That is 28 pages as well. And I want to say with all the 50s, they're all oversized issues, but I don't know that for certain.
You broke the parallax curse. I think this is the first issue 50 that didn't have parallax in it.
It's funny when I did the number 50 for the new 52, and it was a parallax story. I didn't know that like number 50 with parallax was like a thing. I just knew that coming out of whatever that event was called, they did having a convergence, that parallax was sort of back on the table, and I just thought it would be cool to have Hal fight the parallax version of himself. And when I was talking to my editor, who at the time was Eddie Braganza, who actually worked on the prior 50s when parallax had shown up, he was like, that's a thing, right? And I was like, no, I had no idea that was a thing. Because I'm sure, as we've talked about in the past, prior to coming on to write Green Lantern, I didn't have any real familiarity with the character or really with the DC universe in general, not being someone who grew up reading comics. So, at this point, I'd have to count, but I have to have read over 400 issues of Green Lantern related stuff at this point, but it was a long research process for me to get up to speed on a lot of things, and I just never realized that number 50 was like the parallax thing.
The using the Dark Stars I thought was great. I one of the things I really have to applaud you for was mining some of the Green Lantern history and bringing some characters forward like Sonar and so on, and bringing the Dark Stars back was really kind of neat to see.
Yeah, I wanted to do more of that during the new 52. It was a different time then, and sort of a different mission statement, but, some things didn't work out. Sonar was an example where I did get to do it, but, the second arc of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, the Bottled Light arc where we brought in Brainiac, that was a storyline I wanted to do back in the new 52, where the entire Corps was trapped in Brainiac's bottle, and it just didn't work out. And so with Rebirth and sort of the mission statement being to, push the stories forward and do different things, but also embrace the long storied history of these characters, it became more of an opportunity to do those kinds of concepts. Dark Stars was something else that I had asked if I could play with a bit back in the new 52. And at the time, it just wasn't going to work out. And so, it was nice to be able to do a lot more of those things with the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps run.
Myron and I talked about that whole concept about the mission statement coming out of DC with this whole the writers being able to branch out and be able to be free flowing and be able to write what they want to write and invest themselves in stories and stuff. And I've really noticed that across the board with not just your title itself, but a lot of other titles with the Rebirth. It's this nuanced approach that really, really elevated a lot of writers to different levels, and I got to appreciate that from all you guys.
Yeah, it was a difficult time in the New 52, and that's not to say that the New 52 was the reason for that, but
Right.
I want to say that very soon after I started writing Green Lantern, uh, it was told to us that DC was going to be moving out west, and it was a process that took quite a while because it was obviously a big undertaking, and it was a tumultuous time to be at the company because you didn't know what staff was leaving, you didn't know what staff was going. There were different editors who came on the book because the editor I started with on Green Lantern, Matt Idelson, was one of the editors who chose not to move out west, which was unfortunate because he's a good editor. He's doing things at Dynamite now, and I love working with him, and he's still a friend. But he wanted to stay in New York City, and so he moved out of the Green Lantern editing job, and then they would bring in other people who they would then either decide they weren't going to move out west, or they would be needed in other groups to move them around. And so editorially, there was just a lot of shuffling around, and that's not a complaint coming from me. I mean, these were people that had to make very serious, real-world decisions about did they want to uproot their families and move to the West Coast, or did they want to stay in New York and lose their job? I mean, so I'm not speaking ill about any of it, but it was a pretty long process to get all those things shook out. And when Rebirth happened, it wasn't just so much a change in editorial direction and being able to embrace the histories more and things like I said earlier. It was also a moment where everything's set up now. Everybody's staffed up. We've got all the people transitioned out here that were going to come out here. We've hired up all the new people that we needed to fill the spots for the people who did move out here. And now the company is fully staffed. And I think across the board, from my experience, that's as much of a factor in the difference in the storytelling as the difference in editorial direction is, because I think something that's really hard for people to truly understand, unless you've been in it and you've been doing it, is sort of the relentless monster that needs to be content in monthly comics. And every 28 days, a book's got to go out the door to the printer, and it has to be written, it has to be penciled, inked, colored, lettered, pre-press, all those kinds of things. And it doesn't matter if the staff isn't there, or if you're in the middle of moving across the country, or any of these kinds of things. Every 28 days, the book still has to go. Sure. So it's not always an opportunity where you can sit back and say, I've done novels, and you have a 2-year lead time on novels. If the novel gets pushed back another 6 months or whatever, those kinds of things are built into the schedule. Monthly comics is not that way. I don't know any other real entertainment industry that is that way, where you have that sort of 28-day treadmill that you have to be on. And it's like the post office. Like, it just doesn't get interrupted no matter what. And so you just kind of have to roll with it and work through those things. And so once everything was settled out west, I think you could just kind of feel the difference across the line. Because I agree with you, so much great storytelling has happened in Rebirth. I mean, I love what Pete Tomasi did. I'm speaking as the writers here. Obviously he worked with Monkey and Gleason, but I love what the creators did on Superman. I love what the creators did on Action Comics. I love what the creators did on Green Arrow. Like, there were so many good stories that came out of it, and even in some instances, like me, where the writers carried over from New 52, you could see a change in it. And so I think those are some of the contributing factors.
So issue 50, the battle between the Dark Stars and the Green Lanterns is really kind of neat, how you kept the battle large for the epic grand scale, but then you focus on Hal and Tomar too and make it a very personal thing. Was that something that you intentionally did, was to try to make it both large and private at the same time?
Yeah, very much so. I think if you go back and you look at the whole Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps run, and I want to say I'm going to throw out some issue numbers throughout the course of this conversation, and I might not always be dead on, but I'll at least be in the ballpark. I want to say it's issue 9 when Tomar 2 really shows up for the first time. That's how soon we started building towards this, long-form arc for Tomar 2. And with so many characters in the Corps, in such a large cast, it gets difficult. I know everybody has their favorites, but it gets difficult to do something with all of them because there's just too many, and you already have 4 leads with Hal, John, Guy, and Kyle. So I don't know. I seized on Tomar 2 as one that I thought could have an interesting arc, not just because he's a character that's been around for a while, but he's also a legacy character, and that his father was a Green Lantern, and also that, Hal's relationship with Tomar Ray, Hal's relationship with Tomar 2, that seemed like it would be something that would fit really nicely into what we wanted to do. And then lastly, but maybe most importantly, there was this theme that ran throughout the entire series that not a lot of people really picked up on, but you can go through almost every single story and in some way see a parent-child relationship operating somewhere in the background. You've got Hal and his dad, Saronic and Sinestro, Tomar Ray and his father, and the whole arc that we go through there, starting out with Bottled Light, going all the way through to the end. You have General Zod and his son. You have the Guardians who view the Green Lantern Corps as children, and it just goes on and on and on. That parent-child theme is throughout the entire run. And again, Tomar 2 was a lantern outside of our core 4 that I felt would be good to keep that theme going.
Well, I thought, what was really kind of interesting was you kind of talked about it, the whole mentor-mentee relationship between Hal and Tomar 2, and how Tomar Ray was to Hal what Hal kind of is to Tomar 2, and yet 2 of them are very much reflections of how people deal with grief that comes from tragedy. And in this particular issue, when you have Hal having that comment with Tomar 2, where he really brings forward that revelation that, deep down, Tomar 2 is just a scared kid who lost his dad, and he couldn't get past the murder of his father. Unlike Hal, who took the best parts of his father with him, Tomar 2 didn't do that.
Right.
Yeah, to put it simply, I feel that as a character, it was the death of Martin Jordan that made Hal a hero, and it was the death of Tomar Ray that made Tomar 2 a villain. It was an event that wasn't exactly similar. I mean, Martin died in a plane crash, and Tomar 2 was killed by a criminal. But rest in peace, Goldface. It was a long time coming, buddy. It was your time to go. You know what I mean? Those are both very traumatic experiences, and in some ways, I would say Hal's was even more traumatic because he witnessed it. But he took that and he made it into something that was a positive force for him, whereas Tomar 2 did the exact opposite. And again, it just plays into that theme that I was talking about earlier about parent-child and how much are we influenced by our parents, and what do we gain from them, and what do we lose from them, and all those kinds of things. Tomar 2 is just a perfect character to really encapsulate all of that. And in his confrontation with Hal, have these realizations about himself as well, and Tomar 2 doesn't understand it. He's perplexed. How do you do it? How did your father die in this way, and you're not angry about it? Like he's mystified by it, and that way I think Tomar 2 is kind of tragic. He can't even get his head around the possibility of moving past this event in his life, even when he's standing here looking at someone who's proven that it's possible. And I don't know, all those things make for a richer story, I feel.
Well, and I think, when it comes to Hal in particular, Hal's never been a character who has been self-reflective, at least outwardly. So he, if he thinks about these kind of things, he doesn't share them. So for Hal to make that revelation here, I thought showed a lot of growth for the character. And we kind of saw some similar things back when Hal was in the jet construct and his father shows up.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite issues of the entire run. 16 will be another one's a favorite of mine when Guy Gardner fights Arkillo. But that originally the Fall of the Gods arc was supposed to be 5 issues. And this is a little bit inside baseball. It's process stuff, but maybe you guys find it interesting. So Metal was going on at the same time, and I knew that we were going to be doing an issue that tied into sort of a Metal, not the main story, but a tie-in story with Justice League. and with Flash. I knew that was happening, and my editors did as well. And at one point, I'm going to try to recreate this in my head because it's confusing. At one point, it was going to be issue 31, I think. Or no, it was going to be issue 30. And so, no, it was going to be issue 31. Yes, it was going to be issue 31. So Fall of the Gods was going to be 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It was going to be 5 issues. Well, after we'd already started writing it and some of the issues were already drawn, they came back and said it's going to be 30 now, and not 31. So you have to end that story at 4 issues so you can do the crossover. And I was like, okay. And so at that point, I was faced with, do I want to have a bigger battle in the final act of this story and really blow it out with the Green Lantern Corps fighting the robots? Or do I want to keep my issue where Hal races Light Ray in a construct jet to see who's the fastest flyer, and basically he just rides around with his dad in a plane for the whole issue? And so the sacrifice for me to have had more action and a bigger blowout ending for that story arc, which would have been nice to do because you have these giant robots, and we'd already set up, you can tell from issue 26 how big, we were going with these things, with Orion flinging out of the boom tube and this big towering thing fighting on Slidia and knocking over buildings and all this kind of stuff. But I really wanted to keep that character issue with Hal and his dad intact, and so I made the choice to keep that issue in 28, and that caused the big blowout ending to get truncated down a little bit. Now later on, they came back and said, now it's going to be issue 32 that is the metal tie-in. It's not 31, like we originally thought, and then we moved it to 30. Now we're moving it to 32. And I was like, cool, that means I can have the 5th issue back of this other story. And they're like, no, instead of doing 2 one-offs in a row, we'd rather have you do a 2-parter or something instead. So keep Fall of the Gods at 4 and then come up with a 2-parter. And I was like, well, how much time do I have to come up with it? And they were like, by the end of this phone call. and I was like, all right, Hal goes to Earth, and I've always wanted to do a story with Hector Hammond, so we're going to have the Croatians come back, and can I use Superman? And they were like, yes, cool. And then I wrote that 2-parter, and then the metal story ended up being issue 32. So,
just to expound on Hector Hammond, I have not had as much fun reading Hector Hammond in a long time as I have in this arc.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, he's been fun to do. I don't know. He's such a weird, just creepy-looking dude, and hats off to Patrick Zurcher when he drew that original 2-parter. He really was able to capture sort of the sympathetic side of this poor guy just being, experimented on by these Krolatians, and doesn't even have the voice to cry out. He has to cry out with his mind, and he ended up becoming something playing a larger part than I originally thought he would, but it was because he just kind of presented himself that way, and he almost demanded it in a weird way. What I had done with him in 31 and 32 just seemed like something we could carry forward into this final arc. And in a sense, when we're trying to, reference all the previous storylines we've done and sort of get the band back together for one last hurrah and all those kinds of things, he could play a really fun, interesting part in what is a very serious, heavy story. He could add some levity in there and do it in a very earnest way.
Well, yeah, and it all seemed very natural and very much in character.
Well, and it looked like he looked like he was meshing well with Hal. Just a relationship and how it was developing the way you wrote it. You could just tell there was some camaraderie between them, and I could honestly sit there and I'm thinking to myself, this is Hal talking to Hector Hammond in this way. It's like, is there a friendship developing here? Are they gonna go off into the sunset together, like Arkillo and Guy Gardner, or what's happening?
Well, I wouldn't say they're besties like Arkillo and Guy Gardner, but
no, definitely not.
I would say it was an interesting thing for Hal to be in that position, right? Because when it comes to Hector Hammond, Hal is the voice of reason. He's the one who's always like, "Hey, man, we got to pump the brakes here." You know what I mean?
Sure.
You can't just go exploding people's heads. Which is an interesting thing for Hal to be in, right? Because he's the one who never puts on the brakes, right?
Right.
So to have that role where he almost has to be a babysitter for Hector Hammond, I thought would add a unique situation for him in this arc, on top of all the other things we were trying to do.
We were talking about Tomar 2 a little bit ago, and This issue doesn't end without its own tragedy, but I love the way in which you handled the resolution of Tomar 2's arc with a lot of grace and dignity and kept the character intact. He wasn't villainized, and I really appreciate that.
There was some discussion about that, knowing that we were going to get rid of all the Dark Stars and there wasn't going to be a Dark Star force out there anymore, that he would stick around and just be known as Dark Star, and he would be like a villain floating around the universe or something like that. But as I was writing the story, this just seemed like the honest ending that it would take. This is the way things would actually go, and this is what actually would happen. And to try to force in something else, I didn't think would have the same sort of honesty that the ending that we have now has.
When you talk about him being a tragic character, so a tragic ending like that would be only befitting of his type of characterization. He had to die a tragic death to overcome the fear, the guilt he had from his dad and from what he done.
Yeah, Dark Star to the end.
Right.
He held true to his own philosophy. He had killed, and so the lethal justice is what he deserved. So it, in that way, he stayed true to his own ethic.
Speaking of lethal justice, Myron, I got to ask Mr. Venditti this. So, Jon Stewart is supposed to encapsulate this whole idea of a military style persona, and while there's a lot of fans out there that debate on who's the best Green Lantern or who from Earth is, and Jon Stewart has always been my least favorite. However, he's my least favorite because he's always been known, he's killed before in the past. Isn't that ironic how when you wrote this story arc, he's the one that instilled no lethal force moving forward where nobody could die when he's killed before?
Yeah, and he raises that very point to Zod. I can't remember what issue it is, but he says that very thing because he's not a sniper anymore, and he knows what that is like. To him, he almost sees the Dark Star's version of the law as the sniper's version of the law, and what he did in wartime, that's war, and that's that he did his duty. But to take that same sort of model and apply it to a justice system. When you're a sniper and you're shooting somebody from 500 yards away, there's no trial, there's no there's no due process, there's none of that. It's a kill, and so who knows that better than him to be able to distinguish that line between what you do on a battlefield when you don't have any other choice and what you do as a legal system in a way of policing free people, So to me, it made sense for him to make that realization, and who would have more credibility saying something like that than he does,
Yeah, and he's willing to make the hard choices. I remember an issue of the Green Lantern Corps run when Van Jensen was writing that book, and there was an issue that he wrote where John was trapped with some other Green Lanterns, and he ended up breaking the neck of one of his fellow Green Lanterns because he was about to give away some secrets. And so it's neat to see that.
That was Tomasi, I think, wrote that issue.
Was it Tomasi? Okay, I thought it was Van. Okay.
Yeah.
Kurt was that character name. I said KRRRT, I think is Kurt.
Yep.
Is that his
so. He was a blue guy. Yeah.
And so it was neat to see
right. Yeah.
John at this point in his life where he's very resolute in, we're not going to cross this line. And there's a moment in this issue where, he's called to question by Zod and Arkillo, and it was great to see Kyle and Guy have John's back completely.
Yeah, I think more than anything, what I wanted to do with the series, and Phil, you kind of alluded to it a minute ago, is everybody has their favorite Green Lantern, and it can be such a divided fan base at times.
It really is.
And you've got your Hal fans, and your Giant fans, and your Kyle fans, and nobody admits to being a Guy fan hardly ever, but they're out there too, and of which I count myself a Guy fan. I love the character, but I understand having a favorite, but I think sometimes that being a House fan means that you hate all the other Lanterns, or being a John fan means you hate Hal or whatever,
Sure.
To me, one of the I wanted to do with the book was have these 4 characters that everybody's been arguing about forever and put them all in the same book. Don't make them all the same guy. Keep them with all their differences and their unique personalities and the things that make them separate, but show how much love and admiration they have for each other after all the things that they've been through. And if Hal Jordan likes Jon Stewart, and if Jon Stewart likes Kyle Rayner, then the fans should feel that way too. That's kind of not saying that's going to happen, obviously.
Definitely not.
If the characters all like each other, why can't the fans all like all the characters too? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to, especially now that the Green Lantern universe has kind of shrunk a little bit, is everybody wants their favorite to get panel time. So there's always this, well, your guy got this. And, there's a whole online thing of people complaining about the series and as a whole because it's Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps. So that must mean that he's better in DC's eyes than John and Guy and Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, put all that aside, though, and just look at the actual story.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, look at the actual story. If there's one thing that I tried to do, and, of course, I wasn't always as successful as I want to be, and you look back and there's always things you want to do differently, but I tried very hard to build storylines for all of the characters, doing things that only they would be doing. If the opening story, if Hal Jordan is the one who gets captured and by Sinestro, and they try to torture him for answers, it's a much different story than when I put Guy Gardner in that chair. And if Jon Stewart is the one who makes his own ring and blows up Warworld, it's a much different story than when I put Hal there. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Jon Stewart's the one who figures out how to get out of Brainiac's bottle. Hal's the one who goes to the Emerald Space because he's become Will. And he meets with Tomar Ray there and is able to bring that message home to Tomar too. And that, of course, builds into what we do with Dark Stars. If you look at the Fall of the Gods arc, you have Hal racing in a construct jet against Light Ray to see who's the fastest flyer, while at the same time Jon Stewart is building a strategy and a way to figure out how to beat these enormous robots by using the Green Lanterns that he has to dig inside Orion's mind and access those memories without bringing Orion back to life, because then the robots would come for him. So John has to figure all that out. Meanwhile, Kyle Rayner is creating a construct heart, and who better than Kyle to be the one to have someone's life literally in their hands? To me, he's the most altruistic of all the Lanterns. Who better than him to have to make this extremely intricate device with his artistic mind and render this computer image of a theoretical device as a real construct that works and operates, and to never let up and to never stop for as long as it takes until that battle's won, so that the construct heart will be keeping Orion alive. Like, those are all different things that I built for those individual characters that you couldn't swap that out and have Hal build the heart while Kyle races in a construct jet. Like, it doesn't work. So I know that people, they want to argue over who has the most panel time or any of these kinds of things, but I tried very hard to build these stories out so that every character had their moments to shine and did things that only they could do, and proves why they are the best at using their will in that certain way. And then on top of that, show why these 4 guys together are much stronger than any of them are individually. And by the time we get to issue 51, I really feel like these 4 Lanterns here, the 4 Corpsmen as I call them, like, they can take on anybody, because together they're the whole puzzle. You know what I mean? They're the brains, they're the fist, they're the guts, and they're the heart. All together, they're the whole body. And I don't know who would beat that. And we didn't start the series there. If you think about where we started with the series and where I was coming into, Kyle was an Omega Lantern, and John and Guy were in another universe, and Sinestro was like 80 years old. It was like I had to bring all those things together to get where we are by issue 51. And if you read the whole thing, I feel like we were more successful than not at giving everybody the time to shine and to do what they do best.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, me too.
So, as good as the battle with the Dark Stars was, the conclusion of this issue, I found immensely rewarding. Seeing the rings go out and do more recruiting, and then you either teased us or tormented us, depending on how you look at it, back in issue 31 when Hal got to go and talk to Carol, and just as he gets there, they kind of yanked the dollar bill away from us.
I was sad about that. I was really sad about that at the time.
And I love the way
knew when I did that in issue 31, I knew that we were going to do this ending. I didn't know what issue it was going to take place at that point. That was a year ago, so I didn't know if it was going to be 50 or 40 or 60 or what. But I knew for a very long time, since 31 and even prior, that would be the final ending to the series. And I know I didn't do a lot with Carol in the New 52, and I didn't do anything with her at all, really, in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, but those weren't the kind of stories that I was trying to tell. And I do feel like, and it'll be interesting to see how people respond to that ending, But I do think with two characters that have been through as much as they have, as many times as they have, there's nothing to say. You don't need to say anything, Like they've been through it all. They're beyond words at this point in their relationship and how well they know each other and what's on each other's minds. And so it just, again, it felt like an honest ending to how that would resolve, as opposed to some, 8-page conversation or something like that.
Right. It felt very natural, very human. And like you said a lot without having to use a lot of words. And Rafa Sandoval's last panel, there's so much just in that one panel. And it's just visual image of the two of them embracing, but it says everything you need to say. And I remember back when you wrote issue 31, when I wrote my review, I was like, boy, Venditti's a heartless guy. But you get to hear it, and it was like, oh, this is so great to see the two of them. And like you said, they don't need to say anything because they have such a rich history. And the dialogue is exactly what I would have imagined them to have.
Well, that's good to hear. And I knew Rafa would be able to totally execute that because, he and I, before he came on to Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and I counted, I can't remember the exact number of issues that he drew. I wish I could know that number off the top of my head. It's in the 20s, though. Certainly drew more than anybody else, but he and I had done a few issues of X-O Man of War when I was working at Valiant, and that was the first time we had worked together. And one of the issues that we did was the wedding issue where X-O Man of War proposes to his girlfriend, and then they get married and all these kinds of things. And he just really nailed the romance and the postures and just the beauty of those subtle moments, And so I was really glad for him to be able to do this last arc and for him to be able to do that moment because, one, I felt like he'd earned it. He'd done, like I say, more issues than anybody else in the series, but also I knew he'd really be able to execute it perfectly, and he did.
It's a great image. It really is.
Yeah, if I could buy an original page, that'd probably be the one I'd buy. It's fantastic. Now, I've been watching for his name in the solicitations since this book was announced as being canceled. I haven't seen too much other than a couple of covers. Do you know if he's got a new assignment that he's going to be working on a book that you can say?
He does. He definitely does. If you haven't seen it, solicitations, and it probably hasn't been announced, I shouldn't say.
Right, absolutely.
But I 100%. I think another one of the things that I'll be able to look back on this run and always be really pleased with is how much Rafa Sandoval really introduced himself to the comic reading public with this series. And it would be hard to describe how difficult a series like this is. Like there's your team books, are always more difficult than a solo book because they have more characters. But then you've got a Green Lantern Corps book where the team is like 500 things, and they're all like weird aliens and all this crazy stuff. And he would always go so far above and beyond and draw like lanterns in the background that he would just make stuff up and draw like a lantern that looks like a bird or whatever, just because he wanted to do something fun, and it would always look so cool. And for him to do these huge battle scenes and be able to execute those, plus all the crazy constructs that go with that, while at the same time being able to handle the more subtle, quieter moments like, characters talking and the facial expressions or the scene with Hal and Carol, and also being able to execute things that are funny, like the scene where Hector Hammond, changes everybody's outfits and makes them feel like they're at the beach or they're at a ballpark or a birthday party, or, back in the Zod's Will arc when Laura's on top of Guy and he's just pounding him in the face, and Guy's trying to get him to stop because he doesn't want to punch a kid, and all these kinds of things that he's able to land the humor on top of it too, while at the same time producing it at such a pace that he's able to draw that number of issues over the course of 2 years is really just astounding. And so I couldn't be happier for him and for the notoriety that he's gotten. And he's going to work on something that's super cool, and I can't wait to see what he does with it.
Well, I'll be looking forward to see what that's going to be. Now, we all know you're writing Damage and Hawkman. Was Hawkman something that you asked about doing? Were you approached to do Hawkman?
They approached me to do Hawkman, and I was immediately on board with it because for myself, the kind of writer that I am, everybody has holes in their game. There's things you do well and there's things you don't do well, and it's always going to be that way. But one thing that I think I do well is I'm a puzzle piece writer. I can figure out how to make all the pieces fit. And I've been throwing some crazy stuff over the course of my time, up to and including we need a story by the time we hang up this phone call, and, writing a book where I have to come up with different stories for all 4 of these leads and all these kinds of things. And so Hawkman, not knowing a lot about him from having read it, I just knew his reputation was that he was this incredible morass of continuity that nobody had been able to make sense of. So he was the ultimate puzzle, So when they asked me to pitch on Hawkman, I really liked the idea, the challenge of that, and getting to work with Brian Hitch on it. He's just such a fantastic artist, fantastic storyteller, so many ideas of his own. The collaborative relationship between us is really great, and I feel like we're firing all cylinders. And if you're somebody who's read Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and you enjoyed it, I would say give Hawkman a shot, because we're doing some cosmic things there as well as some Earthbound things. And
I agree. It's a good book.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It really is. It really is. It's really, because I read Hawkman in the past somewhat, but I've always been confused of his continuity, like you like you had stated in what you just said. And I don't know, it seemed like the first issue I read that you put out, it seemed like it solidified everything that was Hawkman for me. And I was like, okay, now it makes sense. Now I have some direction that I can go with on this character. And
yeah, it's he reincarnates across space and time. Like, I think that's a very easy thing to grasp a hold of. So if you've been enjoying Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, follow us over there. I think you'll find some things that you'll like. And if you absolutely hated Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, still follow us over there, and maybe you'll like it better.
Good statement.
Now, you really write long form. You develop a lot of plot threads, and then you kind of let them sit for a while, then pick them up later so that it feels very organic. Was there anything that you planted a seed for in this series that you didn't get a chance to finish out that you really, really wanted to?
Oh, yeah. I'll give you 2. We were going to do, at one point, a crossover with my book and Green Lanterns, and it was going to be a fight between the Green Lantern Corps and a Power Ring Corps from the Earth 3 universe. So it was going to be all the villain versions of all the characters, except, of course, for Hal, because he's already been killed. But so it would have been like evil Kilowog, not evil, but all the Power Ring wearers possessed by the rings from that universe fighting our Green Lantern Corps, and you would have all those doubles: Kilowog versus Kilowog, and Guy versus Guy, and Kyle versus Kyle, and all those things. That never worked out for various reasons. And then another one. So when I originally pitched the Zod's Will storyline, the concept was that General Zod was on this planet with 2 yellow suns, and so he was much stronger there, but that only holds true if he's on that planet. So he was going to get all the Daxamites, and it was going to be like a political intrigue story of how the Daxamites come to live on that world with him. And now he has this Daxamite army that's all supercharged up. It was going to be all of them versus the entire Green Lantern Corps. That was a story that we were going to do And they liked that idea so much as they started talking about us maybe doing it as a crossover between Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and Action Comics. But again, it just didn't work out for various reasons, and scheduling and things like that. So that's the way things go sometimes. There's always going to be stuff that you leave on the table, but I'm happy with what we were able to include.
What do you think is the biggest risk you took on your run with Hal Jordan?
Doing the book. I mean, coming off a New 52, let's say let's say it like it is. I wasn't the most beloved Green Lantern writer coming out of New 52. But also, this was the book that, for the reasons we talked about earlier, was going to feature all 4 of these characters that people were going to already be predisposed not to like, because it wasn't a John book, and so the John fans aren't going to like it, and it's not a Kyle book, so the Kyle fans aren't going to like it, and all of those kinds of things. So, to me, I don't want to make it sound like this is an excuse, because it's not. But when I came on and I started writing Green Lantern, I had written maybe 12 issues of serialized comics in my entire career, and all of those, for the most part, had been X-Men of War and then like a couple of issues of Demon Knights. And now here I'm writing Green Lantern, which is a flagship character of a group with 5 issues coming out a month, and following up Jeff Johns. And I don't even really know the DC universe all that well, I think if you go back and you read Green Lantern 21 and you read Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps 51, I would hope that you'd be able to, or I'm sorry, 50. I hope you would be able to see that I evolved as a writer and I learned a lot of things, and that's completely agree. And that's okay, I recognize that as well. And as a writer, you're always going to learn, and hopefully you're always going to learn and grow and become better. And for somebody coming into the series the way that I did, what I was able to learn in the New 52, I really wanted to come back in Rebirth and say, I want to take all those things that I learned and I want to apply them now. And I basically put all my career, I feel, on that line. Because if I tank it again and people still hate it, and I'm speaking, less charitably of the New 52 stuff. I don't know that people hated it, but it certainly wasn't beloved, But if I go ahead and I do the Rebirth stuff and people don't like it, I'm probably going to be toast. But if I can go and do Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and I can win people over with this book that's going to be a team book, and it's going to have the whole cast in one book, and it's already going to, be a very complicated double ship book, which I'd never done before, and put together a nice long run that does some nice things with these characters, then I'll be able to prove to myself that I can. Then I'm able to do this, And that's another aspect of the series too. I don't know, but I want to say that Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, is the only series of all of Rebirth that went all those double ship issues. Every single issue was on time, and I wrote every single one of them with not one break anywhere. I did 51 issues in a row. Every 2 weeks a book came out the whole way through, and it stayed double shipped that whole time. There's other books that have the same writers, but they went down to one a month, or there's other books that are still double shipped, and somebody came in and wrote a fill-in issue to give them a break or whatever have you. I did the whole 51 issues, every single one on time. And the artist played a huge part in that too. That is a grueling schedule, because now it's not every 28 days a book's got to go, it's every 14 days a book has got to go, which is a crazy schedule with the quality of the art that we've had on the series and the complexity of the stories and it being a team book and all these other things. So I know these are all things that are inside baseball and maybe fans don't really care about them, but for me as a writer and as someone who does this professionally, that's something to be very proud of.
Fans should care, right, Myron? You would agree with that. I mean, we all should care about this process.
Absolutely. I think this book has been blessed with some of the strongest artwork of any of the DC Rebirth books, to be quite honest. And, to be completely fair, you kind of were given the Kobayashi Maru of writing assignments, because you were following a run that was probably it was the most critically and commercially successful Green Lantern run in the history of the character, and it was like, oh, here you go. So, I think it would be any hard for anybody to live up to the expectations that were created for you.
Yeah, and I knew that going in. I knew that I was following Jeff's run and how beloved that was and how much he'd done for the character, and I knew that I was very new to these kinds of things. But I'd rather be the one who takes a shot at that than somebody who always wonders what if.
Right, right.
So I have no regrets about any of it. I would not have been able to write, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps Rebirth #1. I love what we were able to do in that issue. Or, like I say, issue 16 or issue 28 with Hal and his dad in the fighter jet, or the Dark Stars arc, or any of these kinds of things. I wouldn't have been able to do any of that if I had not written Green Lantern 21, 22, 23, and all those things going forward. So it's a big wall, and all the bricks go in the wall, and they're all part of the writer that you are right now, and you can't go back and take out bricks because then the whole wall would come down. So I'm happy where we ended up with the series. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity, and for DC to have given me the opportunity to stay on the Rebirth book and to continue writing the characters. I think it's 85 issues I did, not including annuals. It's a really long run by today's standards. So, I've got no regrets about any of it.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. And, one of the things I wanted to say to you, and I was glad we got the opportunity to talk this evening, was, I've been doing this show for about 8 years or so, and no creator, whether it be animated or in the comics or in any form of DC media, has been as approachable and as generous with their time as you have been. So I really wanted to thank you, because you've been on the show. This is your 6th time, which is amazing.
Is it really?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I really love talking about myself, don't I?
Well, I really appreciate you being as open and welcoming as you've been, because, I'm a small media outlet. So when DC does their big promotional stuff, we really, as a small outlet, don't get that kind of attention. So for any creator to want to talk to us is very rewarding, because we do this out of love. We're not doing this for money. We don't get paid for it. It's not my job. It's not Phil's job. We do it because we love it and we want to see it successful. So to see anybody give us a crumb to go with is great, and you've given us a whole meal. So I really, really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate it. It's a couple of things. On the one hand, my dad sold concrete. My mom was like a stenographer. The idea that anybody would want to talk to me about anything still mystifies me every day. Like, all I've ever wanted to do in my whole life was be a writer. Like, I'm literally living my childhood dream. Starting as far back as I can remember, elementary school age, I was writing stories. This is the only thing I ever wanted to do. And I had those moments, in grad school and when I got out of grad school. And if I could just publish something one time in some literary journal somewhere and nobody ever reads it, but I'll at least know that I did it once, that'll be enough for me, And now I have a book that comes out, every 2 weeks, and another book that comes out every month. And, for me to be in that position and be able to do those things every day, it's a gift. And so, I don't know, I can't imagine myself getting to the point where I wasn't amazed that people were actually interested in any of it or wanted to talk about any of it, But the other side of that is so much of what you guys do, and I know you said you're a small outlet or whatever, but that's so important to the overall success of what we do as creators in the comic book field. It's the passion and the dedication and all the effort that the fans put into these things to really care about them and think about them and speak about them intelligently and all those kinds of things. Like, that's such a huge part of all of it. So I don't know why I wouldn't want to engage in those kinds of discussions, So, I mean, I'm thankful that you guys have wanted to have me on 6 times. I mean, I don't know. That's probably like 6 hours of your life that you've wasted on me, So I'm just as appreciative right back.
I got to
The thing about it is too, Myron, is like with Venditti's run on Hal Jordan, we always, you and I know even some of the other fans that I've talked to, we always look back and we always talk about what writer we felt was, best situated for the time when they were writing the Green Lantern title. You talk about Jeff Johns and some of the other past when we do our retro reviews. Looking forward, when people look back on Green Lantern, Mr. Venditti's run on it, it'll always be a focus point. And I've always told some of the people that I've talked to, like, hey, if you want to start and get a good background in the history of Green Lantern, go to Rebirth. I said, but if you really want to get up to speed, go into the current run, starting after the New 52. I was like, I guarantee you're going to be impressed with it. And a lot of people have. And Mr. Venditti, you've left your mark on this character yourself, and I'm appreciative of it because I know, like with Myron, him and I are about the same age. We've been reading this character for years now, and it doesn't come along very often to where a writer can have a really, really strong impact on the community of the fan base, and you really have on this character, and I commend you for it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. There's definitely some people out there who would disagree with you.
Sure they are.
They're super vocal about it, but that's okay. That's all part of it as well. And
it is.
I think that one thing that I like is that, as crazy as it sounds, and as long as these characters have been around, I'm the only one who's ever written a book called Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps. I wrote 51 issues of it. And it's the only time that these 4 characters have all been together under the same roof for that kind of extended period of time. And it's certainly not the mythology building run that Jeff did. He added so much to the mythos, and that so many things have gone to live on in so many different forms, whether it be toys or games or films or animated or what have you. But it is a unique version of the mythology to have had them all in the same book. It's for such an extended period of time, and that's why I took to calling them the 4 Corpsmen, and that's how I'll always think about them. And I don't know that I would want to go back to writing a book that didn't have the 4 of them in it, because I'd miss having them all hang out and being friends with each other, and that camaraderie that they've had throughout this series.
But if you're going to do that, then you have to come back with a title that says Guy Gardner and Arkillo off into the sunset.
I actually know I already know what a Guy Gardner and Arkillo series would be. Like, I know who the cast is. I know what they would do. Like, I know all of it. So if DC's ever wants to pull that trigger, I'd write that in a second. But,
it's a fantastic partnership. And Myron, do you know? Did it originate with Venditti's run, or? I guess. Yes. Yeah, I guess it was. I mean, it's just a unique partnership that you didn't see coming, and it just hits you, and you're like, it works. I get it.
They were a lot of fun to write. I just saw them as 2 sides of the same coin. As Guy said, when he challenges Arkillo in issue 16, there's only room for one me. So we're going to figure out who that's going to be right now. And just the tragedy of Guy's character, that after he gets in this fight and you realize that the reason why he can take a punch so well is because no punch he takes hurts as bad as the ones his dad gave him, and how that drives him. And he beats Arkillo to a pulp. And then in the very next issue, he goes and visits someone. He's laying, Arkillo's laying in a bed, all bandaged up in his prison cell, and Guy's remorseful about it, And to me, that sums him up more than anything else. He's just this enormously tragic character who can't even accept that he's good at the things that he's good at, or that he has any true value other than to just get punched in the face all the time, And that was where I really sort of came around on Guy, and he became one of my favorite characters to write, because he's just so earnest, and he's so tragic, and he just I don't know. He just breaks your heart in some ways when you think about it and what he's been through and how he still views himself. But it makes him a really interesting, compelling character to write, which I don't think are adjectives that anybody would ever apply to Guy Gardner ever. Interesting and compelling. But there we are, you know.
Well, so much of his character early on was about being resentful of Hal being in the spotlight and him wanting to be looked at in the same way that Hal was. And here you really see him throughout your run really step up to be his own person and realize that he's okay just the way he is.
Yeah, and he was always, I think, I don't want to say always, that's certainly not true. I think Pete Tomasi did some excellent stuff with Guy Gardner, but he was often written as just this enormous, ludicrous jerk with no explanation for why he's behaving that way, you know? And it's like, that's what I didn't want to write him, you know? When DC came to me and said they wanted to do a book called Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and asked me if I'd be interested, and it was going to star all four, you know, of these characters, in my head, I didn't say this to them, but in my head I was like, man, I do not want to write Guy Gardner. That dude's such a buffoon. What am I going to do with that dope? You know what I mean? But then I really started thinking about him. Like, why is he a buffoon? Like, why does he act this way? Well, it's because he walks into a room and he walks into a conflict and he mouths off because he wants you to punch him in the face. And he wants it for two reasons. One, because he feels like he deserves it. Because when your own dad has punched you in the face, who doesn't deserve to punch you in the face, right? But then also, if you're punching him in the face, you're not punching any of his friends. And like, that's the only thing that he thinks he can do well, is just take a punch and keep taking punches. And as long as he doesn't fall over and you have to keep hitting him, every punch you land is a punch that you didn't land on somebody else. That's incredibly noble and incredibly self-sacrificing. Not that he would ever even view it that way, because in his mind, he just deserves to get beat up again. But that to me is like exceptionally heroic, you know? And so as I started to think about that, him as a character and what really drives him and what motivates him and how gut-wrenching it all really is, he became essential to the whole story, you know? As I said before, they're all parts of a body, and you know, without him, it's like he says in whatever issue it was, you know, there's 4 seats in a Mustang and 4 legs on a table and all that kind of stuff. And when he calls them the 4 Corpsmen, when he says it to them, he says, you know, the only good thing I ever did was be your guys' friend, you know. And man, he means it in that moment. Like, as much as his life has been a mess and all the things he screwed up and his, you know, the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father and all the things he's done wrong, this is the thing he did right. If he can be friends with Hal and John and Kyle, and those guys respect and love and rely on him, then there has to be some value in him, whether he sees it or not, because all of them see it, and he respects and loves and admires and relies on each of them. And to me, that's what the series is all about. What do you see in your friends? What qualities do they have that you find lacking in yourself that makes you want to be friends with them and to admire them and to respect them and to look up to them? And how do these 4 guys have that relationship with each other?
I think that's very apropos. You know, Guy's original creation, it came about because he was brain damaged. He got put in a coma. He was stored in the Phantom Zone, and when they brought him out of his coma, he just wasn't the same. So it's much more organic and much more meaning behind the story.
Yeah, I like how he is now.
Yeah, man, I hope I get the chance to write him again. You know, I know he's, I guess, I mean, I don't know, but it certainly seems like he's the least, you know, quotes around it, popular of the 4 in terms of fan base. He definitely has his dedicated fans out there. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that a lot of people have reached out to me, you know, on social media or have come up to me at a convention, and they've said to me, man, I used to hate Guy Gardner, and now I love Guy Gardner. And to me, I think that's great. You know, to be able to win over just one person like that would make me happy. But there's been more of them, and I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen with the character now, how he'll be handled, but I would love to see some of these things carried forward.
Super. Well, again, I want to thank you for your time. We've kind of kept you way over what we were told we were going to get you for, so we appreciate you giving us the extra time. Any parting words you want to say? I know you're writing Hawkman. Just remember, once a Green Lantern, always a Green Lantern. So
I still got my lamp. I just redid. We had to do a lot of work in the house this year, and I've still got my lamp sitting. I'm looking at it right now in my office, still sitting there. My son comes in and puts on the ring and charges it up every once in a while. So I'll never forget the time I was on the book, and I can't thank the fans enough, and all the people that read it, and were with me for this whole journey. Of 85 plus issues, and all the things that we were able to do with the characters, and to be able to spend that much time with characters as high profile as this in the DC universe. It's such an exciting time to be in comics and to be in the DCU and to be doing these kinds of things, and something I'll always look back on fondly. And any of the fans, I'm not going to go away. I'm on social media all the time. I'm still writing Hawkman. I'm still writing Damage. I've got some projects that'll be announced, within the next few months. So I'll still be doing plenty of things. But it's like you say, once a member of the Corps, you're always a member of the Corps. So I appreciate everything from everybody, and who knows what the future holds. But hopefully, I'll be seeing some of y'all at conventions or talking with you on social media, into the future as well.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Rob.
Right. It's good to meet you, Mr. Venditti. Really, it was really an honor to meet you tonight. And it was really nice to talk to you about the book and everything. And I appreciate the time you gave us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast of OA, and I guess we just listened to the last words of a great man. I'm sad to see him go.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about what Grant Morrison might be doing. Everything I've read about what he's going to do is exciting. But I think when you look at Robert Venditti's body of work, and he mentioned himself that maybe some of his early stuff wasn't his strongest. But I think when you look at his body of work, for somebody who walked into a very unenviable position, to walk into having to follow Jeff Johns and take the baton from a run like that and go forward with it, it takes someone who is confident in their writing skills to take that kind of an assignment in the first place, and to carry it this far forward, I think is a testament to the kind of writer he is. And I hope he gets to come back, just like Jeff Johns is writing the Green Lantern Corps movie script. I hope Robert gets a chance to come back and visit this universe again, and maybe pick up on some things that he didn't get to write about the first time around.
I agree, and he's a great writer. He's doing great work on Hawkman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really strong book, and I really think he's going to take that to new levels too, especially with the characterization of Connor Hawk. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I've been an on again and off again Hawkman fan, and when I saw that he was writing it, I thought, boy, this is great for him, because he gets the luxury of doing his kind of writing, but without being burdened by such a huge run, because Hawkman has been a character that's been kind of left on the shelf for a while, and here's a chance for him to kind of start fresh with it without any expectations,
And much like the Green Lantern Corps, I think Venditti has a knack for injecting a nuanced approach to a characterization. I mean, he did the same thing with the Four Corpsmen, so I don't see him doing anything different with Hawkman. He'll take that to a new level. Yeah,
I agree. So from our perspective, now that we have read the final issue, you and I can now start going back and reading the Green Lanterns book that Dan Jurgens was writing, because you and I both said, hey, we're not touching it until the Venditti run is over, just because we don't want to have the spoiled story experience. So
right. Maybe, and I think that's 3 issues. I think we're probably 3 issues out over that, right?
Yeah, I think it's 3 issues. So maybe what we'll do is we'll try to record an episode and release another one next week, and we'll give people a double dose in 2 weeks of them having to put up with us talk about Green Lantern stuff. But maybe we'll do that, and we'll talk about the Green Lanterns book. But this has been a hoot. I love talking with different creators, and Rob's a great one to talk to. I hope you had a good time.
He really is, and I appreciate you getting a chance to get him on here, so I could get an opportunity to talk to him. I mean, a lot of these writers and these artists, for that matter, and any kind of process that goes into making these books, I think any fan out there should learn to experience having to listen to an interview with one of these people. I mean, they put their all into it, and Venditti probably more so than some with what he did with this run of Hal Jordan. And a lot of these guys don't get the respect they deserve. I mean, sure, we're nice to them on Twitter, and sure, we buy their products. But, I mean, much like anybody else, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and they should be aware of that.
Yeah. I think Rob is, like I said, we've said it before, Rob is a great guy, and he's a good person to get that from, because he's so unassuming.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and I appreciate you being able to stop, drop, and roll, because we weren't planning on recording tonight, but this came out of the blue. And then when I told them, well, they wanted to know if I could work on do it at Thursday or Friday. I'm going to be out of town on Thursday and Friday, because my wife and I are celebrating our 31st wedding anniversary, and we're going out of town. And they said, well, he's available. He's not available Wednesday, but he's available Tuesday night. And so, you were so good to jump on last minute and say, yeah, we can do this. We'll make it work. So I appreciate that.
Had to make it work. Had to make this work.
All right, guys. Well, we will be back not too much further down the road in the future. So we hope you enjoyed this interview with Robert Venditti, and we'll see you soon. As always, keep your power rings charged, be good to each other, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofOA.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.